Hi, my name's Jana, and I'd like to let you know that down at the Feng Shui Center, and I'm the owner of the Feng Shui Center, every Thursday at noon we have a free lecture, and we have different metaphysical speakers. So we try to get in some of the local speakers and people from out of town when they come through town. So we hope to see you there at the Feng Shui Center every Thursday at noon. And if you want more information about which lecture is coming up, you can call us down at 543-7677. Okay, I also would like to tell everybody about the Oasis Wednesday night series. And Mel and Stephanie run that at Wild Ground, and that's every Wednesday night starting at 7:30. And for more information, you can call them at 327-7977.
Hi, my name is Heidi, and we're here to explore metaphysical and holistic concepts. Before we get into our 2-hour-long show tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about the astrology for the week. And one of the big occurrences happening today is Saturn is conjuncting Jupiter. They're in the same place in the sky at about 22 degrees Taurus. It's the final touch of that big Taurus alignment. The energy of that alignment is sort of coming to a close around the first week of June, and this is one of the big days of May, and it's one of the reasons I wanted a special show today. We have 4 guests with us today talking about Earth alternatives to living on the planet and having a relationship with her, and I think that you'll be very interested, so stay tuned. They're all very well versed in their different ventures, and I also wanted to talk for the rest of you about Saturn and Jupiter, well, and for me too. Saturn and Jupiter, the conjunction is called the king-making aspect, and it's the balance of limitations and expansion. It's wise movement and wise action. It's wisdom in general. And so we're coming to a place where we have some insights to what has been happening on the planet over the last few decades and definitely over the past month. And the moon is in Aries, so we're ready to take action. Emotionally, we're ready to take action on what we've learned. What comes to mind immediately is the Los Alamos fire, and the sun is in the sun is in Gemini, so we'll be getting a lot more information about how to handle these types of environmental disasters and, again, our relationship with the planet. On Thursday, we'll have the sun in opposition to Pluto, a very intense day. Wednesday before it will also have some of that feel, and Friday after it. Really stirred up passions, and if any of the topics today bring up anything that stirs your passions, move on it. It's a really good time to really act on what's really, really important to you and what you really think will help transform the planet. On Friday we have Mars trining Uranus. Again, it's unexpected but inspired action that will take us into the future. And on Saturday we have Venus opposing Pluto. So if anything is out of line in a relationship, a love relationship that you're having, a lot of that will come up. And again, that Saturday, but the Friday before and the Sunday after will also have that energy. So be kind to each other and get the roses ready. And I'm really happy to have Saloma Deidre Sipe here today. She's going to start our 2-hour-long show, and also known as Mountain Mother, and you're here to talk to us about herbalism and also a bit about hemp products. So I'm really
Yes.
pleased to have you back.
Thanks, Heidi. I'm pleased to be here.
And I'd like to hear just about how your overall philosophy about herbs. Are they our teachers? Are they our friends? Are they gifts from the earth? Are they all of those? Or how would you describe
You know what,
herbs?
Heidi, I don't have my mic on tonight. Do I need?
Can you?
Are these going to work for us?
I think. Are you picking up, Deidre? Yeah.
Are we
You're
good?
getting picked up.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So my philosophy on who the herbs are here on the planet, I'm sure you can imagine that my own personal views are that the herbal beings here are very animate, intimate beings who care about us very much. They could be viewed, in my opinion, almost as higher beings than humans. And they're very easily talk to us and offer us solutions to all of life problems. And what I see a lot and what I like to let people know is that one of the reasons we have such a diversity of plants and the colors and shapes is because that old axiom is very true that God provides for all things. And we see that in the diversity of plant life that we have on this planet, that there is a solution to all things. And I don't view that so much allopathically or medicinally the way a lot of Western people view medicine, as much as when I see herbs working to facilitate people moving into grace or moving into a state of ease as opposed to a state of dis-ease, what I see is the personality of that plant really touching the spirit or the soul of the person. And it's almost like an old friend that knocks on your door and says, "Hey, remember me? I'm your old friend, the one that teaches you how to see right, or teaches your heart how to open." And they're very, very intimate beings that have the power to go right to the depths of our soul.
And is there an herbal solution for almost every physical ailment?
In my opinion, yes. In my opinion, there are no incurables, what a lot of allopathic doctors consider incurable diseases, like cancer, AIDS. I know we have these big fights, the war against AIDS and the war against cancer, and it's turned into a kind of a self-defeating, cause, like a souffle that already fell, and we're trying to serve it to ourselves again and again. In my opinion, those diseases aren't incurable, and it may depend on how we use the herbs, and it may not necessarily just be drinking tea or even using herbs in a crude fashion at all, but yes, there is a solution for any type of disease that we experience here on the planet.
Through herbs.
Yes.
What are some of the other ways to use herbs?
Well, we've talked about this a little bit before on your show, Heidi. There seem to be, and I'm sure that you would agree with me once we get this out on the table, there are a lot of other influences within herbs themselves. For instance, every herb is ruled by a particular planet.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about how alfalfa is ruled by Venus
Mm-hmm.
the last time I was on the show.
That's right.
And so sometimes we might not necessarily go through a list of herbs and pick an herb, we say, okay, alfalfa is good for blood sugar regulation, and we picked it out of this list of physical symptoms. But we might see from a more holistic view that the person that we are working with really, their main issues of disease stem from attributes that we would consider Venusian. So we would look at a list of herbs attributed to Venus rather than herbs attributed to spleen and kidney disorders, and approach it from that perspective. The other thing that we've also talked about is the refining of herbal substances, and you can do that two ways, both of which make the particle size smaller and consequently enable it to act on a deeper level. One of those is by making flower essences or homeopathics, which are very dilute, and the other is by distilling the flowers or the plants or the trees into essential oils.
And do you ever use tinctures? Is that the same thing as the essential oil?
Tinctures and essential oils are very different. what a tincture is when I make a tincture, let's say tinctures are something I make for myself and the community uses here, the tinctures that I make from the plants that grow here. What I'll do is I will, now this is particular to my form of medicine, not all herbalists will do all of these things that I'm about to explain, but let's say when I'm making a tincture, let's take alfalfa for example again. I will pick a day when Venus is highly aspected, when the moon is waxing. For instance, I want to look to a well-aspected Venus in the first quarter of the moon, when the plant is flowering, and I will, what we call, garble the plant after I harvest it. I'll say a prayer first, then I'll chop it very finely, and measure what we call menstruum, which is usually pure grain alcohol, but can also be brandy or any other form of spirits, and sometimes we use glycerin. I personally don't prefer glycerin. And then I leave that for a month to 6 weeks until I find another appropriate aspect in the stars that can enhance the medicinal qualities of this. And then I take that herb out of the menstruum, out of the alcohol, and what we have is the alcohol has changed places with the oxygen in the plant and consequently extracted its medicinal particles into the alcohol. So then we have a medicinal substance called a tincture. And when they're made with pure grain alcohol and with fresh plants, and particularly when attention is paid to the spirit of the plant and the other aspects, the medicine can be very strong. However, tinctures are never anywhere near as strong as essential oils. You know, you could drink ounces of a tincture and you would be getting much less plant material than you would be getting if you put 1 drop of an essential oil in a glass of water and drank it. Would you like me to explain how essential oils are made also?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Essential oil production is a new thing for North Americans. There are 2 steam upright distillation systems in North America, one of which was designed, in fact I think both of them were designed by a close friend of mine who's done a lot of pioneering research in modern aromatherapy. And when we make essential oils, rather than, when I make a tincture, I might go out to my yard or my field and I may need just 1 bush or 1 plant. I'm going to make quite a bit of tincture just from this 1 little plant. But when we make essential oils, we need thousands of acres. So instead of this 1 little plant, I'm going to need to grow acres and acres and acres of lavender. And what we'll do is we'll take this lavender, for instance, an acre or 2 at a time, literally all of the lavender that's grown on an acre or 2 of land, and chop it with a machine, with a winnowing machine for a commercial farm. And then what we do is pour it into this double boiler distiller on the outside edges, and underneath is a very, very hot boiling water that's creating steam in the middle chamber. And the pressure of the steam rising forces what we call the blood or the juice of the plant out of the plant and into a central chamber. And as that heat continues to rise, those vapors condense and turn into what we call the essential oil and drip down into a collection pot. And so they're very, very concentrated. That acre of lavender may make an ounce or 2 of the essential oil.
Wow, that's plant and labor intensive.
Yes, it's very intensive.
And now I didn't hear the part with the essential oils about doing it according to the planets and with the prayers and all of that. Does that also happen?
Well, most people don't, but like I said with the tinctures, most people don't with tinctures either.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you know, a lot of herbalists and a lot of aromatherapists approach their field the way an allopathic medical doctor would. And whether or not, I think a lot of people may stay in that spot out of fear of ridicule, you know, but I do know the man I was speaking of earlier, the one person who's designed steam distillation in America. He is so precise as to harvest his plants at optimum hours according to planetary aspects. So
this is one of the things they use at Waldorf schools is astrological gardening. I think that's really interesting. And again, they use the planets to decide when to plant and when to harvest. And I think most of it's for eating. I'm not sure about that. I wanted to ask about the essential oils. It would be almost impossible to do something like American ginseng or something like that.
To make an essential oil of
Yeah.
ginseng?
Yeah.
Well, we do see, we've been experimenting with things that you wouldn't typically consider to be made into an essential oil. But yeah, you can almost tell. I can sense you feeling. You know, how do we get the juice out of this plant? There's just not much juice in it. It's a very hard root, like wild yam or something. And there's just not much, and we use the root as opposed to the aerial parts of the plant for medicine.
Right.
But you do see some plants like that. For instance, they now make essential oil of arnica. Not very many people make it, but that would be considered, you know, comparable to rose oil. And there's very little blood or juice in the plant because it's so delicate and such fine tissues. But we are able to do a little bit of that.
I'm also thinking about plants that aren't in as much abundance, where you wouldn't have as much available to do the distillation. And isn't American ginseng like exorbitant in cost?
It is, and as far as wildcrafting it or harvesting from the wild is concerned, that would definitely be impossible at this point, mainly because of population growth. You know, just the habitat disappears, and of course, over-harvesting with ginseng is, in the past, has been an issue. But it is farmed, and that's what we see most of the time with distillation processes, is that the majority of the plants used are farmed.
And what's your feeling in the difference between harvested herbs, you know, agriculturally grown herbs, and wild crafting?
Well, it depends on a lot of factors, and it really depends on what you want to do with the herb. In my own experience, I notice very subtle differences in the medicine, even between elevations or parent material in the rock beds. For example, arnica. I noticed that if I wildcraft arnica at 8,000 feet, it's at least twice as strong as arnica I wildcraft at 4,000 feet.
Wow.
And the reasoning in my belief for that is that there is less oxygen at that level of the earth, and the plant has to work harder to survive. So the spirit in that particular plant is very tenuous, has a lot of strength. It's a very strong plant to live at that high elevation, just like someone who lives at that high elevation has very strong lungs, very strong heart. And so we see that then in the medicine, that the strength of this plant comes through in the medicine. So of course then any plant wildcrafted that has the heart and the strength to grow on its own in the wild is going to be stronger than something that, in certain aspects at least, is going to be stronger than something that's well tended and cultivated. However, if we use herbs nutritionally, we may want to cultivate intentionally, because as nutritional support we may see those qualities of cultivation be beneficial to us. The caring and the tenderness may create higher levels of iron and zinc and vitamins within a crop like alfalfa or lavender. So.
And I have one more question about the just the harvesting. I know there are a lot of wildcraft walks available in Missoula. I see the signs up for it all the time. But if somebody is going to go out and do it on their own, what herb would you suggest they start with? What herb will cause the least imbalance if people go out and pick it on their own?
Well, do you mind if I give a list with that of ones that I definitely would prefer if people didn't pick?
Sure, you can start with that.
Because we do have, this is very important at this point because
Okay.
of human impingement on land resources,
Okay.
and if for no other reason. And those would include trillium and echinacea in particular, as well as lady slipper,
Okay.
Venus slipper. And those are the three that I really ask people not to pick. And for a beginner, I honestly, when I write about wildcrafting and eating in the wild, I really stress that if you've never had instruction, just don't do it, because there you can very easily make a mistake. And I can illustrate one example again with arnica, that a lot of people will confuse arrowleaf balsam with arnica. Now, arnica is such a powerful herb that if you ate enough of it, it could slow your heart to a point of danger. And so, you don't really want to be confusing herbs like that, and it's easy to do until you've had proper instruction. So a lot of times a book is not enough. But if you want to start on your own, I would start with easily recognizable plants that we consider weeds, such as dandelion or tansy, that grow in abundance. And stay away from riparian areas because their habitat is more endangered.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for all that information. And I think we're ready for another guest, and it's Rich Angel. And Rich, I'll need you to come on around this way, and he'll be with us in just a second. And just to let people know, we're going to have a lot of time for live call-ins, and if you want to write it down now for later, the number is 542-MCAT, 542-6228, and we'll have a lot of time for call-ins, so we'll get back to Deidre and ask her more good questions about herbs. And Rich Angel is here now.
Yes.
Thanks for being here, Rich.
It's my pleasure.
And now you have a way of eating that's new and ancient and unique.
Yes.
You eat mostly raw foods at this point.
Well, about exclusively
Okay.
at this point. I went virtually raw in October of last year. It was my second attempt at going all raw.
Okay.
First time I caved to peer pressure, and also I was detoxing faster than I was comfortable with, and I was scared about the weight I was losing and that kind of thing. And so from that point on, for about 2 years, I ate about 90% raw, something like that. 75 to 95%, depending on the week. And then it dawned on me one day that it wasn't working. This moderation, it's like an alcoholic drinking moderately. And I do see cooked food as an addiction. And I finally decided one day, well, I've gone 2 days without eating any cooked food whatsoever. Why go back? And the transition was actually pretty easy at that point because I had been on the edge for so long. And at this point, I've fallen off the wagon 6 times since last October. And on 6 different days I ate cooked food.
And what happened?
Well, after a couple of days where I was eating particularly nasty food, I mean, I really went off. I ate cookies and cake and ice cream, and then I paid for it out my butt for about a week.
Okay.
That was the only time I had diarrhea the whole 2 months I was down in Mexico is when I ate cooked food, and the rest of the time I was fine. Well, my friends were all getting sick and so on.
That's interesting, because actually I've been warned not to eat fresh fruits and things in Mexico because they wash them in the water, and the water might have, the seeds of Montezuma's revenge.
Right, but if you have a healthy system, if you're on a raw food diet, your body normally eats those things up.
Okay.
Your body normally has a very high percentage of friendly bacteria.
Okay.
We're talking, 85% friendly bacteria and 15% unfriendly, and they're outnumbered under normal circumstances. The time we get sick is when they have a place to hide, that is to say in compacted fecal matter and so on and so forth, and when we have a weak system, when our own friendly bacteria are depleted by antibiotics, pesticides, alcohol, and so on.
And what's a typical day's worth of food for you?
Well,
What do you eat, and how do you prepare it? Is there any preparation at all?
sure.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Well, it depends on what you're eating. When I was in Mexico, a typical day I'd eat a papaya, and in the earlier part of the day, and then later in the day I'd usually have a salad made with avocados and cucumbers and tomatoes and all kinds of good stuff like that. Here, I try to eat in season and locally as much as I can. And right now, the dandelions are out in full force. So are the lamb's quarters. I go out in my backyard and I pick dandelions and lamb's quarters and put together a salad. I might add some avocado and some kind of oil, such as extra virgin olive oil, or better yet, high lignin Barlean's flax oil. And if I'm really going to go for it, there's always a hemp oil.
And those are all cold pressed.
Exactly.
There's no heating.
Exactly.
To get those
right.
oils.
Exactly. And so, well, today I had a smoothie that was composed of soaked sesame seeds, a few pine nuts, a few dates, and a few bananas, and water. It was good. And then later in the day, I had juice. I took dandelions and mint, and I threw them in a blender with water, and voila, and ran it through a strainer, and there was my dandelion mint juice.
That sounds great.
It was.
So you get your protein from the nuts?
Actually, that's a myth. You get more fat from nuts than you do protein.
Okay.
Yeah. And the truth, the protein question comes up all the time. The truth is, if people are on an all vegan diet, they get their protein from the same source that the animals, meat eaters, get. You know, it's plant food. It's in there.
So is there a whole community of raw foods
there is.
eaters?
Yeah, it's growing. Believe me, it's growing.
And do any of them look like they're suffering from protein deficiency?
No, as a matter of fact.
Low energy, lack of iron, or any of the things people usually associate with meat eating?
No. No, by and large, except for people who are still in transition and they're detoxing, raw foodists are the healthiest people you can ever see. The guy who wrote this book, Stephen Arlen, he
Building strength and muscle naturally.
Yeah, this guy recently bench pressed 300 pounds and
on a raw food diet.
On a totally raw food diet, yeah.
There's someone on the crew who might be interested in that.
Right.
Okay.
I haven't quite gotten to that point yet. In fact, I think I'm still in a state of detox, which can take years, actually.
Okay, now what is detoxing? What actually happens to you?
Well,
I mean, you don't have DTs.
DTUs.
DTs, delirium tremens. What is, when people stop alcohol, they get the shakes.
Oh.
You don't have that.
Oh, no, nothing like that. Well, let's start with a baby, okay? The baby's got a pure system and hasn't been corrupted yet, hopefully. And then people try to feed the baby cooked or processed baby food or something that doesn't belong in the system, and then they wonder why the kid throws up. Well, they keep trying. Eventually, the kid gets it down, but then guess what? It comes out the other end. And then they give them, instead of saying, well, maybe we should be feeding them differently, they give them medicine to stop the diarrhea, which is exactly what you don't want to do. Well, that's where the storing of toxins begin. You see, in a perfect world, imagine a stream, okay? And you may have toxins going in it. You might have animal droppings and so on, but it's in a state of constant cleanse. But if you've got a chemical waste source constantly putting stuff in there before it can get washed out, it's going to get clogged up. It's going to, right? Our bodies are no different. In a perfect world, we might have toxins in the environment. Even if there's no civilization, we still might breathe volcanic whatever.
Right.
It just comes right out. It comes out from the skin. It comes out in the breath. It comes out in the excrement. It comes out in the tears. But when there's too much of it, we can't process it fast enough, and the body says, well, we got to deal with that later. These are the individual cells talking to each other, right? And it gets stored in the cells for later discharge. So the average person today is just loaded with toxins. As a matter of fact, I'm told that during the Vietnam War, when the soldiers were shot, the Vietnamese corpses would decompose just like that, and the American corpses, with all the chemicals and additives and preservatives and so on and so forth, they took a long time to rot. So we're talking
interesting and gruesome. Yeah.
Gruesome, but sometimes you got to be when painting a truthful picture about what we're doing to our bodies. I agree 100% with Deidre that there's no incurable disease, and we're going at it the wrong way.
Now, how would you answer somebody who says, I'm type O blood and I have to have meat? There's a whole eating according to blood type.
Yeah, I think things like blood type and food combining, I think those are more geared toward cooked food eaters.
Okay.
I believe that once you're on a totally raw food diet, that those things matter less.
Okay.
And as for blood types, I'm sure there are raw foodists of every blood type. And
That are doing well.
that are, yeah. So I'm sorry, I think I got off on a tangent. That happens sometimes. But we were talking about the detox.
Right.
Right. So what happens is, we're loaded with toxins, all right? And the body can't handle all of that. But then when you jump a level of health, for example, if you start eating some kind of superfood, or you eat a bucket of tomatoes for the first time during the summer after eating canned food all winter, something like that, your body jumps a level and basically says, okay, now is the time to cleanse stuff out. And if it happens too fast, that can happen in the form of diarrhea, colds, flus. You notice colds and flus happen usually after the holidays, after people start getting back on a more healthful diet, and then they blame it on a virus, which has nothing to do with anything. And so anyway, I recommend, if there's one thing I recommend, is making the transition slowly and comfortably and having fun with it. There are all kinds of things that you can eat that are a lot of fun to eat. And also, as your diet purifies, you find that the raw foods taste good, especially if you're eating organic food like you're supposed to.
And is your diet vegan? Do you eat raw milk?
No.
Or honey?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Because those aren't cooked. But
Right.
you're off the animal wheel.
Yeah. I have in the past eaten raw eggs, but it didn't do anything for me, so I let that go.
So is your body really sensitive now to anything that's off for it?
Yeah.
Now, are there any raw foods that don't do well by you?
Well, I'm not fond of sprouted beans, lentils, things like that at all. And in my opinion about that is, if it doesn't taste raw, it shouldn't be eaten in the first place. Potatoes are an example. I
You don't
believe
eat
that.
those?
Right. And I believe those are hybrids anyway. So
Hybrids of what?
I don't know.
Oh.
But they go back thousands of years, and they're not really a naturally, they can't grow without humans replanting them.
Oh, okay. But you do juice yams, right?
Oh yeah, that's a whole different family.
Okay.
That's my favorite juice.
Juiced yams.
Yeah, and I might add a little ginger or mint or something in there with it. Yeah, it tastes somewhat similar to chocolate milk, only better.
So you talked about hybrids. Does this mean you also stay away from genetically engineered food?
Well, of course. Yeah, that might be the subject of the next speaker.
And you brought some different books here.
Oh, yes,
you
I
want to?
did.
And do you know if these are available in the library? Because
No, these would probably have to be special ordered.
okay.
Yeah. This is called Nature's First Law.
The raw
is
food
that? Yeah.
diet.
This
Okay.
is a
It's got some guys eating off a
yeah.
tree.
We got naked guys in a tree eating fruit, and this is a really in-your-face book. This is not for the person who's easily offended by different
Okay.
opinions. The last sentence of each chapter is "Cooked food is poison."
Okay.
By the way, one of the authors is going to be phoning in on the Roseanne. It's already been taped on the Roseanne show
Okay.
on Tuesday,
Okay.
the 30th.
The 30th of May.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and he makes a statement, cooked food is poison, and it's supposed to be pretty funny.
Okay.
And then this next book that I brought, this is by David Wolf.
Sun food diet.
Yeah, David Wolf. This is the guy who's going to be on the Roseanne show. And what's good about this book is it teaches you how to make that transition from a cooked food diet to a raw food diet.
Okay.
And you can go in stages, so it's gentle on your system.
Now, metaphysically, this brings up the sun food diet, that
Right.
you're eating more of the energy of the sun, which
Absolutely.
is a very intense
Right.
life-forming energy, obviously.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And dining in the raw.
Yeah, living foods give life, dead food gives death.
So people can figure out what to cook.
Right.
And you said there's another website called living/foods.com?
not underscore, living-foods.com. What's nice about this book is
And that
it-
has recipes.
it does have recipes, but it also is a good book for someone making a transition. It does have some cooked food integrated, but
Okay.
they're more healthful, relatively speaking, foods. So it's a great book for making that transition.
Okay, thanks a lot. And again, we're
You're
going to
most
have
welcome.
live call-ins, probably in about a half an hour, and the number is 542-MCAT, 542-6228. And right now, we're going to listen to a harpist, Bonnie Pulliam. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm sure we're all going to enjoy this. Thank you so much, Bonnie, and we'll be hearing more of your beautiful harping near the end of the show, probably about 20 minutes to 10, so that'll be another wonderful section of music for us. And I'll be giving out phone numbers for everybody at the end of the next break. So stay tuned so you know how to contact everybody that we're having on the show today. And right now we have Alexandra Burt, and Alexandra's been on with us before. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
And you are a practitioner of the Feldenkrais method.
That's right.
I can say method.
Yes.
Okay. And we're not going to do the movements today like we did last time, which were very interesting. And they actually, for me, they sort of, this will sound funny, but felt like they were changing the circuitry in my brain a bit. And they were very simple movements, things that I normally do, but sort of did backwards instead.
Yes.
I don't know if these were synapses that used to be there and they came back, or they were totally new, but it was a very interesting experience. And how did Moshe Feldenkrais, he was the founder, the creator of this, how did he come up with this idea?
He came up with this idea, well, he was a scientist and a physicist, and he loved movement. He was a soccer player and a very avid martial artist, and it turned out that he injured his knees playing soccer, and then it was exacerbated when he was working during World War II on some ships. So when his knees blew out, he saw the best surgeon in England to see what he could do, and he was told that he must have surgery, and he sought a different way. He didn't want surgery. It wasn't guaranteed that his knees would be fully operative after that. So he began studying all kinds of things: yoga, acupuncture, kinesiology, physiology, neurology, and he began manipulating his knee and did a pretty good job. Just working on the knee, he was functioning again and thought, you know, I've got the answer, I'm cured. And it wasn't his goal to set out and become a quote-unquote healer, developer of a particular method. But it happened then one day he was walking and stepped off a curb and hurt his knee. And he thought, oh, I have been like all the other idiots, quote-unquote. I've just been looking at the knee. I need to look at the whole body and to use myself in a more organized, more efficient, better fashion. So that's when he started, you know, looking at the connections of everything. The connections of well, say the knee would be the most direct relationship, then would be the hip and the foot. That's in between those two places. But then it started getting more and more what we might think removed, but in fact the eye is connected to the toe, and on, and actually you start breathing better, and it's amazing that your stomach aches go away. So it was started out small and just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And he worked with the Prime Minister of Israel, and this is what really got him off the ground, so to speak, because he was a highly respected man, and there was a picture of the Prime Minister of Israel and Moshe. The Prime Minister was standing on his head, and Moshe was next to him. And this went, you know, all over Europe in the papers. So people were running to Moshe for private sessions.
To stand on their heads.
for a myriad of things. He worked with cerebral palsy people, people with muscular dystrophy, people that were very, very proficient at what they already did, you know, concert musicians and whatnot, to perfect their movement or to prolong their artistic life or athletic life, so that eventually it needed to come to the masses. And that's when he developed the other aspect of his work. The first part, the one-on-one session, would be a functional integration. And then the second part was awareness through movement, which he taught to very large groups. And toward the end of his life, there would be 250 to 300 people, you know, lying on the floor, and he would be just talking and directing the movement through words, never doing, because you don't imitate anybody else. You sit back in a state of receptivity and non-judgment and non-achievement, and do the movement in from a place of awareness. And this word comes first, awareness, through movement.
Mm-hmm.
So we're using the movement as a vehicle to become more aware. And it's not uncommon, for example, for somebody to think, if we're, say, taking the head against the shoulder and the eyes in one direction, you know,
Mhm.
odd configurations like this, or that they might think the eyes are moving in the opposite direction because they could do it on one side but not on the other.
Mhm.
And you can very easily deceive yourself and think that you're doing one thing when in fact you're not. And in these classes you find out what it is that you're doing or not doing. And to translate that, you know, into the broader perspective, if we aren't aware of what we're doing physically, or if we think we're doing something physically that we're not, or vice versa,
Mhm.
you can imagine what it is with our thoughts,
Mhm.
or with something that's more unavailable to us. Say the emotions are unexplainable, or with, you know, lots of variables in there. So it is acting upon the body, and he didn't address so much the what you call the psychological, emotional aspect of it, but it's so clearly a part of the work that it's something that you deal with on your own, so to speak, because he couldn't possibly, you know, have people coming to him with every kind of problem. It would be too much.
Now, do you think that that kind of awareness, when it, you know, goes outward into the psychological and into how we are with other people, our relationships with all different kinds of people, does that awareness become sort of self-centered, or does it open up healing? Does it open up an awareness where you are more inclined to act mindfully with other people, or does it cocoon you into...
I think it depends on the person, actually.
Okay.
And we talked about this in the training, where people will come and they'll say, well, I haven't changed at all, you know, nothing has happened. And then the husband will come in and say, what did you do? My wife is so much easier to get along with. And the kids will say, wow, my mom is feeling great. But, you know, they might not necessarily sense it. And it depends on which way you want to go with it. You know, Moshe dealt with the physical and the environment. For instance, if there was a cerebral palsy child who couldn't crawl or roll over, he might see that the mother and the father are catering so much to this child that there's no incentive for the child to move. So in this way, he would, you know, the environment and the psychological aspect would be integrated into the session, but it's through the physical, if
Mhm.
that makes sense, yeah. But I think it certainly can affect your relationship with other people, and of course yourself, because as you become more aware of what you're doing and with the kinds of thoughts and things that are coming up as you're doing a particular movement, how can that not in some way start to feed in to the other aspects of how we behave?
Yeah, I don't know how I couldn't.
Yeah.
And now, cerebral palsy is considered a very debilitating disease.
Mm.
And I know you've done work with people with that disease, but I'm also wondering about trauma. Like, if somebody has a traumatic experience emotionally or physically,
Mm-hmm.
Would you suggest doing Feldenkrais immediately, or waiting a couple weeks, or?
Well, it depends. Sometimes when there's trauma, for instance, something like a rape, and if it's a young person, they might not be ready to be touched by a stranger.
Mm.
For instance, if it's a car accident, I would go to a Feldenkrais practitioner immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it would depend on how bad. There's a very good place for our hospitals in allopathic medicine, and it's not that Feldenkrais is against surgery or anything like that. It has its place, and Feldenkrais can be used in assisting one to kind of work out of that quicker and to avoid the mishap in the future.
Mm.
Because we might get a sprained ankle or broken leg, whatever it is, and we think, well, you know, that's just how it is. Well, I'm sorry, that's not how it has to be.
Okay.
You know, we can use ourselves in a way that we don't do that. But yeah, with the trauma, I think it really varies on the person and the kind of trauma that it is involved.
So, if somebody has do people come to you before they get body pains, or is it almost after?
It's almost always after, and especially now because I'm in Missoula and a lot of people haven't either experienced it or heard too much about it.
Mhm.
And the idea in our culture isn't that you do too much for yourself until you have pain.
Right.
Yeah. So there's part of that conditioning. There's also the conditioning of more pain, more gain.
Mhm.
So when they feel pain, oh well, I'll just work through it and I'll do more. But you, in general, it comes by degrees, and the water wears away the rock.
Okay.
That, you know, I can turn, you know, fully and completely, and then over the years, pretty soon it gets like this, and then pretty soon it gets like this, and then I work with seniors who can't get out of bed because they can't only move their head like this, you know. So it's very helpful if you can, you know, get the work before there's pain. But pain, unfortunately, is the main motivator. And maybe it's not so unfortunate. I mean, we have it for a reason, and it serves a purpose.
Is it easier to work with the habits before the pain gets there?
Well, I can work either way. I prefer that people be not in pain when they're lying on the table or
Mhm.
when they're sitting or lying down in a classroom. Makes it easier for me. But you can work with the pain because there are many ways to get to a neck that doesn't move. I can work to the neck through the feet, through the leg, through the arm, through the rib cage. Yeah.
Is there a connection? Have you looked at reflexology and Chinese energy systems and all of that?
A little bit. When I was in pain, which is how I got into this method, I did all of that stuff. You name it, and I did it. Well, I did not call Billy Graham, I have to say. But, yeah. And all those things, you know, they may have helped. And I know acupuncture was really helpful for taking away the pain, but it didn't take away my habits of moving in co-contraction and all this extra hyperextension that I was doing in dance training.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have more time to talk to you when we have the call-ins, and I
Yeah.
want to thank you for even more. I still have lots of questions for you, so maybe I'll get some in too.
Yeah.
But thank you for explaining the Feldenkrais
You're
method.
very welcome.
And talking about bodies.
Yeah.
And we're going to have another guest. You can stay here if you like.
Oh,
She's going to come around
okay.
on the other side of me. And we are going to meet Bronwyn Troutman, and she's here as a member of Garden City Harvest to talk about organic gardening. And in a big way, this is not your garden behind your house. This is the garden behind everybody's house. Thank you so much for being
Hi,
here.
Heidi. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for waiting to be the last. Save the best for the last, possibly. And what is Garden City Harvest?
Garden City Harvest is a nonprofit organization here in Missoula, and it's about 3 years old, and it consists of 4 neighborhood community gardens and 1 big 4-acre farm out at Fort Missoula.
And do you help do the farming?
Yes, I've been involved in pretty much all aspects of the organization, and right now my position is as the garden organizer over on the north side at the North Side Community Garden.
And how many people do gardening over there?
Well, we have 50 rental plots that are individual plots that are rented out to families and individuals. And then I work in an area for the food bank and also for the Volunteer for Veggies program, which means that anybody from the community can come and work with me and learn about gardening and take home fresh vegetables with them.
And do you need more people to do this?
Yeah, we're always looking for more volunteers.
Okay.
And actually that's part of my job is I'm the volunteer coordinator for Garden City Harvest.
Okay.
So if you call and you're interested in gardening and volunteering, I'll be the person that you'll talk to, and I can set you up with the garden closest to you and that works with your schedule.
Okay, and like I said before, I'll be giving out everybody's phone numbers right after the next break. So if you want to contact Alexandra or Bronwyn or the other guests, you can do that. And I wanted to ask how you got interested in organic farming. What's wrong with buying it from a major chain, your veggies from a major chain?
That's a really good question. I think I've always been exposed to it because my mother always had a garden, and so I really didn't know that there was anything other than that. So it's really second nature. And I think that local produce is really important, and so that's a big emphasis in our organization is instead of buying food that's been trucked from, California, we can grow a lot of our own vegetables here for a good part of the year.
And what is the whole philosophy about eating locally?
Well, I think a lot of it is having a connection with your food, and we do a lot of work with kids, and you'd be surprised how many kids don't realize where their food comes from, and they say, "Oh, it's from Safeway," and they don't realize that it actually comes from a plant. So it's and it's not only small children, but it's older kids because we also work with university students. And some people have never been around vegetables. They've never seen vegetables growing. They've never been exposed to that. And I'm always amazed by it because I was always around it. But there are a lot of people that, grew up in a city or just were never around a garden. And so it's just giving people a chance to see where your food comes from and to take part in growing it and to have that connection with your food.
And do the kids get pretty excited?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they love digging in the dirt, and they have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Seeing what they're helping to create.
Mm-hmm.
And why organic? Why don't you spray it for bugs and put fertilizer on it and stuff?
Well, mostly because it's really not necessary. Another reason is because it's a lot more economical not to, and there's really no reason to do it. So conventional farming is a really new thing, and for as long as people have been cultivating their food, we haven't had access to, of course, synthetic chemicals, and so really conventional farming is a totally new idea, and we're not sure about the implications of the chemicals that we're using, and so to be on the safe side, it's probably a good idea to stay away from those kind of things.
I mean, it's pretty pervasive.
Yeah, and I think, the main reason why it's used is because it's the idea that it's more lucrative, it's more efficient, it's cheaper, but actually people are starting to realize that in the long run, if you're losing soil fertility and you're losing topsoil, it really isn't a more economical way to go about it because our topsoil is so much more valuable than getting a good cash crop for that year.
Okay, and can you explain that chain of how we lose topsoil because of chemicals? Or the use of chemicals?
Well, if you're using a synthetic nitrogen or synthetic NPK fertilizer every year, you're not adding any kind of organic matter. And one of the main principles of organic gardening is, of course, composting. And with composting, you're adding organic matter every year. So, for example, at the Northside Garden where I work, the garden's been there for almost 20 years, and each year the soil gets better and better. And that's partly because of compost and also because we do what's called green manuring, which means we're planting cover crops like legumes, clover and vetch and ryegrass and things like that, and tilling it back into the soil, and that actually builds the soil. So each year soil gets better and better. We have more and more organic matter, and it creates an even stronger foundation for your plants, and so you'll have healthy plants and you won't need to use any kind of pesticide or any kind of spray.
And the soil is richer so it doesn't blow off? Is that what happens with
yeah,
topsoil?
going back to your question. Well, if there's no topsoil there, and if the soil is basically sterile, which is what happens when you use a lot of the pesticides, your soil it's not going to be able to I'm not sure actually if I can answer that really articulately, but
Was it sort of like the Dust Bowl that we used to
Yeah.
have that gets so dry that the wind takes it
yeah,
right
that's
away?
part of it.
And if it's
Yeah.
rich and humusy, then it has more chance of sticking there.
Mm-hmm.
And do you do crop rotations?
Yes, that's another one of the main principles of organic gardening is you don't grow the same thing in the same place every year because certain plants actually will take out certain nutrients. So, for example, if you're doing tomatoes every year in the same spot, the tomatoes are always going to be taking out a lot of phosphorus and a lot of the same trace minerals. And so if you do crop rotations, then you're giving the soil a rest. And then if you add cover crops, it'll and incorporate that into the soil. It'll bring back a lot of the nutrients, and then after 5 years or so, you can grow tomatoes there again.
And what are some of the other methods you use so bugs don't eat most of the crops?
Well, one of the things we do is on any organic farm that you go to, you always see a lot of diversity. And that diversity even as far as varieties. So you'll see 10 different kinds of tomatoes. You never just grow one thing.
Okay.
And the reason why is because each variety has resistance to different types of things, different types of diseases, different types of pests. And another reason to plant a huge diversity of plants is there are a lot of herbs and flowers that you can plant that will attract beneficial insects. So flowers aren't just pretty, they are there for a really good reason. Like yarrow will attract lacewings, which eat aphids. And they'll also attract certain kinds of wasps that will parasitize certain kinds of caterpillars that might be eating your corn or something like that.
And what's the benefit of marigold?
Oh, marigolds are great. They actually repel insects.
Oh,
So
okay.
they'll repel potato bugs, which we have here in Missoula, and they'll repel aphids and things that you don't want around. So
And how would you do that? Would you do like every third row marigolds, or put a little ring around them, or
yeah, I mean you could do a border or just plant them in different spots, and yeah, it's great to have marigolds all over your garden.
And so on 1 acre of land, will you get one harvest? How does that work? I mean,
Like harvesting all at once, or
yeah, and I'm also wondering, do you have spring vegetables that come up, and do you replant for fall vegetables? How do you use the land?
Well, we have a pretty short climate here because we're so far north, and we do a lot of cool season crops. So in the spring, we'll have spinach first, and we'll have peas, and we'll have a lot of oriental greens like bok choy, mustard greens. Collards are really frost tolerant, chard, kale, things like that. So a lot of these sort of old-fashioned vegetables that we don't see at Safeway anymore, but something maybe that your grandparents would have eaten, and those are the kind of things that do really well here. And then right around now, Memorial Day is the traditional time to plant tomatoes, corn, squash, beans, things that can't take any frost. So those are the hot season crops, and those are the kind of things you kind of have to baby, and you have to really give a lot of love to, and hope that it'll be a hot enough summer, and that we will get enough red tomatoes. And we use greenhouses too, and so we have a big greenhouse out at Fort Missoula where we actually will plant peppers and tomatoes inside, and that way we can get lots and lots of tomatoes. But if you're doing a garden at your house, you might have to rig up some kind of a little cold frame or something to protect them, especially towards the end of the season if we get an early frost. Sometimes it'll frost in August, and so we're always hoping that we can somehow extend our season with different little tricks like that.
And how many acres do you have again altogether?
Well, let's see. The farm, which is where we have the tractor and all the students from the university in the Peas program, it's about 4 acres this year.
Okay.
And there's a big greenhouse out there too. And they do all the starts for all the gardens there. So that's about 4 acres. And then we've got, I think the 4 neighborhood gardens, none of them are bigger than 1 acre.
And how many people can that feed for a summer?
Well, let's see, the The 4-acre farm at Fort Missoula, we sell 80 shares, which means 80 families come out each week and pick up a share. It's a CSA. And then at the community gardens, well, like at my garden, we have 50 plots, and then so that would be 50 families. And there's 3 other gardens that are similar to that.
It's about 50 more.
Yeah.
So 150, about 230
Yeah.
families.
And then, of course, the food bank, too. We grow tons of vegetables for the food bank.
And as far as you know, people don't have to buy too many extra vegetables beyond what they're getting from
No,
the
it's
garden?
plenty. I mean, people, we
It's a
always
lot.
give out recipes to people, are, what do we do with all these vegetables? And so it's really, teaching people about, different ways to use vegetables, and, you can juice them and preserve them, freeze them, and yeah, so it's definitely enough.
So they could go over there and then call Rich Angel and
Yeah, that's
get
right.
some new blending recipes.
Yeah.
And we're just about done, but I have one more question for you. Do you eat almost all organic?
Yes.
And what do you do do you ever go to restaurants?
Oh, yeah.
You just
Yeah.
say,
Yeah,
I'm eating enough organic
I'm not
to
too
make
rigid about it, but I definitely believe that organic is the only way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much
Yeah,
for being
thanks
here.
for having me.
You're welcome. And Brown will be back, and we'll all be back after the next break. We're going to listen to Elizabeth Bishop with a wonderful message for Missoula. And I'll be giving out everybody's phone numbers after that break. So please stay with us. And 542-6228 for call-ins later.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth J. Bishop, and I channel energies that are no longer in their bodies. I just simply relax, and they use my voice and my body to give information to people. It's nothing strange or scary, and I'm aware of what's going on, but it's not me speaking. Welcome, Missoulians. This is a beautiful day in this wonderful world of yours. I am so thankful to be here today to share with you some information that may be helpful in your lives. Today, right here, right now, you have a great opportunity to be true beings of light in physical form. It is truly a time to share love. Don't get scared. Love is okay. It's not uncool. You don't have to say the word love all the time, but express goodwill and love to each and every being, plant, animal, everything around you. Be sure and come from a place of treating others as you would like to be treated. Yes, whoever it was that said that definitely knew what they were speaking of. And remember, this is a definite area, much like a mecca of great energy. It continues to come into Missoula. Each day, there are people coming into this town, drawn, not knowing why they are coming here. But they have interest, and they have knowledge, and they have wisdom, and they have much great energy. From the very young to the college students, it does not matter what they look like. It does not matter at all what color their skin is, what part of the country or world they're from. It simply matters that they are here, and there is a reason for it. Life truly is an adventure. At this point, we each have a choice to live an absolute drag, bummer, whatever term you currently use, or to have a wondrous adventure. Each moment of your life is truly, truly a choice. No one is doing anything to you. You have a choice to live life vibrantly, caring and lovingly, or a choice to contribute to the confusion, the violence, the anger, and the negativity. At each point of your life, each minute of your day, it is very important that you be aware that you have the ability to create your life as you so choose. It is up to you to choose peace, love, and wonder, or to choose discord, anger, and frustration. Life is truly a beautiful, beautiful experience. Yes, you're probably saying, yeah, right. I bet you anything if I have a wreck, okay? My life doesn't go too well. If I'm on a bicycle and somebody tries to run over me, or if I'm driving a car and somebody cuts me off, I have control over that. Yes, you do. For it is how you react that affects your experience. That other person experiences the same thing. How they react, what they do is their experience, their life. But for us to allow ourselves to be affected by them, we are giving them a lot of power and a lot of energy and wasting our wonderful energy of light and of positive beingness. It's a beautiful place, this planet of ours. It is imperative that we each be aware of everything around us. There is energy in everything, whether it be that little ant crawling about, or whether it be a tree, or a child, or an elder. Each and every being and part of this planet deserves loving treatment. Remember, it is so important, if you want a beautiful world, if you want a happy, positive life, your environment must reflect that. From your home, to your car, to your workplace or space, and to the town in general, state, country, planet, and universe. One of the things that I see, there is a great deal of unawareness of that one piece of paper that you drop having no impact on this planet. But it does. It is so important. Reuse, recycle, cut back. We are a wasteful society in this day and time. It is important to be good citizens of this world. For you to truly be a happy being, what you say and do to others, what you do and leave behind should be a joy, a positive energy, a clean environment, clean rivers. Treat the mountains and the trees and the bushes and the children, the elders, and people of all ages and all kinds with caring, loving energy. This is a beautiful place. It is not too late. It is time now to truly, truly take care of the place around you. And know that each moment and each step, you're sharing of yourself, as we are all part of the one universe, whether in physical form or not. This truly is a time of great discovery and great change. To experience it in a positive, high energy manner, it is important that we be aware. With the awareness comes great change, and the change becomes adventure rather than sadness, rather than violence, rather than anger. So when you see someone else, and they may upset you a bit, remember that the God, higher power, whatever name you choose to give it, lives in them as well as in yourself. And by giving that energy a chance to express and grow and be right here, right now in your life, you can experience great joy and great wonder. I have come to tell you this because it is now important. It has always been important. But we are at a turning point. This is a time to do it now. And every little bit you do, no matter how small it may seem to you, does make a difference. I thank you for your time, and I wish you great joy and love. Peace.
Thank you very much. That was Elizabeth J. Bishop, and her number, if you'd like any information or like to contact her, is 543-8921, and she has an email address that I'll give out later. So far we've heard from Alexandra Burt. Her phone number is 327-0790. Bronwyn Troutman from Garden City Harvest. If you have any questions for her, if you'd like to join the gang over there, it's 523-FOOD. That's 523-3663. And Rich Angel for Raw Foods, his number is 721-5434. And Saloma Deidre Sipe for Herbalism, 886-9642. And the lovely harpist Bonnie Pulliam at 549-1014. And my wardrobe tonight is being provided by Rainbow's End. And I had one more bit of news. We are going to have Montana's Holistic Festival coming up June 17th from 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. And that's an Oasis production. And if you have any questions, call 327-292-7927. I'm sorry, 327-7927. 7977. Okay, scratch that. If any information for the Montana's Holistic Festival, 327-7977. And we are open for live call-ins. The number is 542-MCAT, 542-6228. And there is one other piece of information. There will be a light shift global meditation on June 1st at noon, and I think that's whatever time zone you're in, it's at noon. If you have if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to the website http://www.maxpages.com/light times with 2 T's. And I'll give that out again too at the end. And again, we have a very talented and informed group of people here, so please give us a call at 542-MCAT if you have any questions for any of the people here. And until you guys call in, I get to ask more questions and they get to ask each other questions. And I know Alexandra had a question for a couple people.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Rich if part of the raw food diet entails eating frozen foods, or if you pretty much avoid frozen foods as well, since it shifts the molecular structure of the food.
Right, and the ice can expand the cells and break them. So the answer to that question would be that frozen foods would be pretty low on the list of things to eat. One thing that I enjoy eating once in a great while is banana ice cream. What I like to do, what you do is you run it through the Champion juicer with the blank on it, not the screen, and what happens is it comes out with the consistency of a Frosty Freeze or something like that.
I've tried it and it's delicious.
Yeah, and people, I mean, it's beyond imagination. Until you actually taste it, you can't imagine how good it is, and why does anybody bother with this stuff you get in the store. And of course you can embellish it with pine nuts, sauce made with dates and carob or raisin, whatever. It's just a question of imagination. So the answer to that question is, yeah, frozen foods maybe would be eaten very sparingly, if at all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And
Sure.
pine nuts aren't usually toasted? They're usually right off the tree?
Toasted? I've never heard of
Okay. Maybe that's just how I've seen them on salads sometimes,
Oh.
toasted pine nuts.
I can't imagine why you would toast them.
They're pretty good.
If
yeah.
I were to do anything with them, I would soak them. Like I soak all nuts and most seeds because what they have is this enzyme inhibitor on them, and in fact you can see it when you soak almonds or walnuts in water. It changes the color of water, and that's stuff you don't want to have in your body, because what it does, see, it's a natural substance that prevents premature germination, but it also prevents digestion. And that's the real reason the squirrels bury nuts, is so that they'll sprout and get rid of that stuff, so that it's more digestible. So where did I start with that? Which question was I answering?
The toasted pine.
The toasted
Oh yeah,
nuts.
yeah. So if I were to do anything with pine nuts, I would soak them first, but I usually don't, because I can never anticipate when I'm going to have them unless I'm planning a potluck or something like that.
So, do you ever grind things? Would you do a soaked peanut
Well,
butter?
peanuts are not on the list of. They're very low on all legumes. Actually, they're just not things that people naturally normally eat. They don't taste good raw,
Okay.
and if it doesn't taste good, why would you want to eat it? And if it's dead, why would you want it in your body?
Okay.
Yeah.
So raw peanuts just don't taste good.
Exactly.
Okay.
I've tried them, and not only that, but they're likely to have fungus on them, which isn't good either.
Okay. And we have a caller, so we'll see what the caller wants to ask. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And who do you have a question for?
For Brownwin, I think.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I grew up with a grandfather who did basically organic farming before it was a popular term or anything like that, and used, because he had a lot of cattle, he used a lot of the cattle manure. And I'm just wondering if there are any natural fertilizers other than that you might recommend, and or if there's a preference.
Well, livestock manure is a great fertilizer for the gardens, and we really prefer to use llama manure over at our gardens, just because llamas digest all the weed seeds, so we're not bringing in any weeds into our gardens, just to be safe.
Oh, that's
But cow manure also works really well, and if you compost it, especially with straw, and make sure it's all the way broken down, then it's really good for the garden also.
Now, isn't there some debate in the organic community, though, that the cows have received steroids and antibiotics, and you
Yeah.
might not want all that stuff in the...
Well, there are some local dairies that are organic, for example, the Lifeline dairy, and that's where we get our cow manure.
So you would be concerned if
Yeah.
they were eating all
Yeah,
that stuff?
and you want to make sure that it doesn't have Tordon in it, because Tordon is it's a broadleaf spray that is sprayed on the pastures, and so when the animal will eat it, and then it'll go through them, and then it's still in the manure, and if you put it on your garden, your tomatoes won't grow right, and so it actually goes through the animal and will affect your crops. So make sure it doesn't have Tordon, and be careful about what people are feeding their animals.
So you end up using fertilizer and pesticides even though, or I'm not fertilizer, but you end up using pesticides even though you haven't sprayed it yourself.
Right, if you're not careful about your source.
Okay, and again, we're open to more call-ins, 542-6228 if you have a question for anybody. And Alexander, did you have another one?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about making a compost at home, which I've attempted in more than once. And maybe you can just say briefly the most efficient way that you know to make a compost at home.
Okay. Well, my favorite way to do it is to get pallets, and you can get them from, like, the Missoulian gives them away. So you can go down there and get 4 pallets, and you can get rebar and stick it in the ground, and that'll keep the pallets up. And you want to have the front so it opens up like a door. And that's a good size for a compost pile. You don't want it much smaller than that, because that is big enough for all the microorganisms to do their job. And what you want to do is layer it with wet green stuff, and that includes kitchen scraps, weeds, fresh grass clippings. You want to layer that with dry, brushy stuff like dry grass clippings, leaves, straw, and you want to make layers. And you also want to make sure that your compost pile is wet but not too wet. So you want it to be about like a wrung-out sponge. And so you can actually water it when you're building your piles. And so you build a nice big pile all the way to the top, and it'll shrink. and you can add to that. And a lot of people will actually have 2 piles going at once, and so you can turn one pile into the other. And while you're turning it, you see if it's too dry, you sprinkle it with water. And if it's not, and if it's too wet, which means it's stinky and anaerobic, you want to add more straw to it. So you can always keep a bale of straw by your compost pile and just add in layers. So you can do like 6-inch layers of wet stuff and dry stuff.
What does anaerobic mean?
Anaerobic means that it's too wet, it's too soggy, it doesn't have enough air in it.
Okay.
So what the straw and the dry brushy stuff does is add air and oxygen.
And how long will it take if you filled that, how long would it take to become soil? Or,
That
humus?
depends. Warmth, like in the summer, it'll be quicker, and in the winter, it really slows down. But if you're maintaining your pile and giving it lots of attention, making sure it's the right, it's not too wet and not too dry, and you're turning it maybe once every 2 weeks, you will have compost probably in 2 or 3 months. And a finished compost will look like nice, dark, rich humus. It shouldn't stink, and it should be completely broken down with nothing recognizable in it, and it should smell like forest soil.
And it doesn't attract bugs, fruit flies, mice, rats, all that?
Oh yeah.
It does.
All that. Well, one thing you can do is don't put things that will attract critters. Like don't put bones, and don't put cheese, and don't put oil and things like that. But most compost piles do have some mice around there. But if you're doing it right, it shouldn't smell, and your neighbors won't complain.
And a cat.
Yeah.
I've heard
Cats
some
like
people
it.
only put raw food. They won't put cooked food in their compost.
Mhm.
I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe that would be a question for the raw foods expert over here.
That's something new to me. I didn't know the
Okay.
bacteria cared about that. Of course, I don't have any cooked food myself, but my housemate, he might throw some bread or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's a problem.
Okay. It may be the critter issue again. It may not
Yeah.
attract as many critters if it's all raw food.
Yeah.
But I'm speculating. We have another caller here. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
And who do you have a question for?
I wanted to find out what a treatment would be like if I came with Golden Christ method. What a treatment would be like if I could describe it in detail. If I came to it for pain of some description, could you detail what the treatment would be like?
It would depend very much on what's going on. Traditionally, you're fully clothed, you remain fully clothed. I ask you a few questions. What helps the pain, what you do for it now, what kinds of movement you do, what position you sleep in, side, back, and I watch you walk to see maybe where you're bearing the weight. And I get an awful lot of information when you just come to the door, just by seeing the stance and where the weight is placed. Then the first session takes a little bit longer. I'm still getting to know the movement patterns that you prefer. Talking to the phone is not there. And it usually lasts, for me, the first session's about an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know if I've been thorough enough for you. Is he still there?
I'm sure he's listening at home.
Uh-huh.
And
After the session, I have you take some steps just to implement what the lesson gave you, because it can sometimes be radically new information. And I often suggest that people walk without heavy boots or anything, just to get a sensation, let the nervous system take it in, and remember as a touchstone for yourself, as a kind of kinesthetic touchstone for yourself, what it felt like to have that organization.
Okay, and it takes about an hour and a half altogether?
Usually an FI can last, functional integration, FI is short for functional integration, lasts from 40 minutes to an hour. Sometimes that can be too much for a person. For instance, if I'm working with a cerebral palsy child, it's better to have short periods 3 times a day, 20 minutes, so the body doesn't get a chance to go back into its old pattern. Now, the first session, like I said, takes a little bit longer because I interview the person. If anything's too personal, they don't have to give me their age or any of that. So it's only what they're comfortable with.
Okay, and I had a question for Deidre. Did you get finished with?
Yes,
okay.
I think so.
Okay. We had intended on having a person talk about hemp products, and she wasn't able to come tonight. But you are multi-talented and know a fair deal about hemp products and their use and the history of it. And I was wondering if you could tell us, first of all, why is there a plant that has so much controversy about whether or not we're allowed to grow it?
Well, from the perspective of hemp as an industrial plant, there's some really interesting history there. And I love American history because it's all so new. And people don't realize, wow, this just happened a generation ago. You know, things were all different. You know, like I like to point out to people, do you remember in the 20s when we all drank Coca-Cola with cocaine in it? You know, and everyone goes, oh, wow, yeah, that's right, that's where that comes from. And it's kind of, the hemp is, the industry, as an industry, has just as much exciting history. And what happened was, when California was settled, particularly northern and central California, most of it was heavily wooded. And there were a lot of small bands of Indians there that were forced out, and the land was homesteaded and eventually bought by someone who was already very wealthy because of the industrial pursuits of his father, and that person is William Randolph Hearst. And we're familiar with that name. Most people are familiar with the name Hearst because of the Patty Hearst story, and she was his granddaughter, and also because you see the name Hearst on the spine of 20 or so of America's leading magazines. The Hearst family is a major publisher. And at that time in history, this is in the 30s, kind of post-World War I, industrial revolution, you know, in the throes of major industrial innovations and lots of changes like what we're experiencing now in the way and people communicated. And the Hearst family owned the San Francisco Chronicle and several other newspapers in California. And he had all of this timberland. He owned a very significant amount, I can't remember the acreage, but a very significant amount of timberland in California. At that time, the land was considered useless. There was no use for trees because all of the paper was made out of hemp. And a lot of our cloth was made out of hemp also. But as a business innovator, Hearst was able to lobby because of his financial prowess in Congress that funds be diverted from the first thing he did was to get Congress to divert funds from hemp production into research to create paper production out of wood pulp. And when we had the process down and had built some prototypes, Hearst then began a very massive campaign to stop the end of hemp production. It really was a basic one-man big business move so that he could gain profit from the timber that he owned. And it sounds almost unbelievable that one man did this to our nation, you know, for his own private gain, but that's essentially what occurred. Hearst began a political campaign funded with his own money to stop using hemp for things that we used it for and begin using timber instead. And he succeeded. And that's when we found the enforcement of prohibition of smoking cannabis as well as prohibition of industrial hemp. It was at the same time, and the propaganda for both was coupled.
And I want you to go on, but I want to get this caller too, so let's see what they have to say. Caller, do you have a question?
Yes. I wanted to tell Bronwyn one thing. I garden at the Northside Garden, and it is an incredible experience. And I know that people have heard it several times. And one of the things that I've used to protect wherever I live and people I know is a white pyramid over it. So there might be a suggestion for that.
I'm sorry, you're coming in and out a little bit. I lost that last sentence and a half.
A white pyramid
Oh,
of light
okay.
over the garden helps protect it, just like your own homes. You can protect them by just visualizing a white pyramid over them.
Oh, okay.
And for Deidre, I was curious. I know there's supposed to be some St. John's wort, I believe, growing on Mount Jumbo and several mountains around here. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true.
Can it be used, or do they just spray it down and kill it?
There's St. John's wort just about everywhere in western Montana, to be honest with you. It's actually one of our top 5 noxious weeds, and I personally love weeds. Dandelion is another one, that we love to hate, but it's big medicine. They call dandelion poor man's ginseng. So, that distinction is really up to the individual. But you can find St. John's wort anywhere, really. The Bison Range is another place that you'll find quite a bit of it. It's also on Mount Sentinel. And the campaign's largely because our populace is basically against the use of herbicides for the past couple years, has not included on Mount Jumbo or Mount Sentinel the use of sprays, but there have been some pretty massive campaigns to pull the plant. Because I'm not quite sure of the entire history of that at this point, what I would suggest is that you call the people that are in charge of managing those lands or any other land that you're considering wildcrafting St. John's wort. And by the way, St. John's wort is a great plant to begin wildcrafting with because it is a weed, and everyone will be happy. Every rancher in the state will give you blessings if you pull some of it.
Okay. All right.
So what you could do is, call Five Valleys Land Trust, call City Council, call the Parks Department. Just make a few phone calls like that and find out the history. And you definitely want to make sure that your wildcrafting plants where pesticides and herbicides haven't been sprayed.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments and questions. And we have another caller on line 2. Caller, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. First of all, there is a friend of mine here in town who is struggling with diabetes, and he is having a lot of problems with his health. Specifically, he's constantly getting very, very sick physically and health-wise. Other than that, he's just having a lot of problems with his health. Basically, every time he eats something, he's throwing up and stuff like that. He's not getting enough vegetables into his diet, and his finances won't allow him to do that. And what I've done for him, and I'd like to get some feedback on what I've done for him if I could, what I've done for him so far is to give him information based on my religious practice, which I use a lot of herbs and incense, aromatherapy type healing, to influence self-healing into his life. And it has helped him, but he's still struggling, and I was wondering if I could get some information from you guys so I could give that to him.
Why don't I keep you on the line and go around the table. What's your first impression, Deidre? My first impression always with diabetes, the root cause of diabetes is very simple, and that is not allowing the sweetness of life to enter you. And it sounds too simple, but that's just something to be contemplated, that diabetes is really a denial of the sweetness of life. And I do have personal, intimate experience with this particular disease. One of the most effective, simpler treatments that you can do for anyone with diabetes that has no precautions, safety-wise, no interactions with other medication, is to make an external oil for massage over the digestive organs, particularly the liver, which is right underneath the right rib, and the spleen, which is right underneath the left rib, and then the kidneys, which would be directly behind the ribs in the back. And the oil that I like to use is, you want to find the highest quality. It is absolutely imperative that you find the highest quality essential oils of fennel and dill, as well as the essential oil of rose geranium. And if you can't afford it, don't use fragrance oil. It has to be essential oil, but if you can afford it, add a drop of rose oil or two. And mix these. You can use your own judgment in some olive oil or another plain oil, and make a small bottle of a massage oil, and then 3 times a day put this oil on these organs and on the feet, and massage it in even up to the calves and the ankles. And myself, when I experienced this disease, my blood sugar was fluctuating from the point of near death, 1425 to 278. And I began this treatment, and 10 days later, my blood sugar had completely stabilized. So it's a very simple treatment that I would highly recommend.
Okay, thanks, Deidre. And Bronwyn, do you have more to add? I should let people know you're also an herbalist and would have insights in both directions, food and herbs.
No, I do a lot of my own incense making as well.
Okay. And you're using pure essences?
Yep, I am. What I do is I have my own distillation processing, whole-based plant setup where I do all of the extractions of the essential oils out of the like pine needles and juniper berries and things like that.
Okay, and let's see what Bronwyn has to add.
Well, I don't have a lot of experience with treating diabetes, but I'd like to extend an invitation for him to come out to my garden and get some fresh air and see the plants growing and the bugs and the kids, and I'll send you home with some fresh vegetables.
All right, cool. That sounds good. Do you how do you want to set that up?
Why don't you give Bronwyn a call after the show, and you guys can arrange the meeting, okay? And now we'll talk to Alexander about the body part of it.
Honestly, I don't think I can add to anything. If he's having trouble breathing or walking or turning,
Well, a lot of the
touching his
problems that
toes,
he's having.
I could probably assist him and give him some ideas and things to work with at home, so that moving, functionally is easier.
No, the second person I talked to, mentioning the garden, I got a real quick question for her, and then I'll continue.
Okay.
Are you familiar, and do you use the utilization of feng shui techniques in your garden?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I always think about feng shui, like with pathways and where I put things, and we try to make it aesthetically pleasing, and definitely think about it. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think it's really interesting.
Would you be interested in learning some more about it? Because I've got some contacts, and I'm actually pretty good at it myself, and I'd be interested in coming on your show and giving some advice.
Sure, it sounds great.
Okay, and why don't you call back when we're done, or I'll put you on hold and they can get your number and information about being on the show sometime. Right. And we have one more person, and then we'll get to our harpist. So Rich, what do you have to add about the food part of the diabetes?
Right, well, as was stated earlier in the show, there's no disease that's incurable.
Okay.
And the other thing is that all disease they're all manifestations of the same thing. They just have different names, and they just happen to attack the weakest organ or whatever. And it basically comes down to a weak immune system. Now, as for diabetes in particular, the way I understand it, it has to do with refined sugars,
right,
and also sugars from hybrided foods such as beets, carrots, and potatoes.
Yeah, he's on a pretty, from what I understand, my friend Melvin, he's on a fairly high dosage amount of injected insulin, and he also has a lot of problems with his feet, and the lady on the far right, I think it was, she mentioned massage into the feet, essential oils. He's having a lot of problems with his feet and stuff, where they're just turning real dark colors and stuff. The same essential oil formula that she mentioned to me, I'm just wondering if that would work, or if I would have to research it a little bit.
Well, again, you can contact Deidre after the show. I'll be giving out the numbers at the end of this next break. We have our harpist all ready to play. And I'm going to put you on hold so that the staff in back can get your phone number and line you up to be on the show someday.
All right.
So thank you. Thank you very much for the call.
and hopefully somebody in the back will get that call. And we're here again with Bonnie Pulliam, and we'll have live call-ins again in a few moments, 542-6228. Thanks, Bonnie.
here from Rainbow's End. They help sponsor the show with wardrobe, and they're at 113 West Main Street in Missoula. And that was Bonnie Pulliam on the harp, a beautiful harpist. She also does therapeutic music. She's trained to do it at the bedside of the dying, chronically ill, terminally ill, and the elderly. Bonnie's number is 549-1014, and that was really beautiful. Bonnie, thank you. And for the numbers for the other panel members here, Alexandra Burt, her phone number is 327-0790. Bronwyn Troutman with Garden City Harvest. You can contact her at 523-FOOD. That's 523-3663. Elizabeth Bishop, who did the break where she channeled, her phone number is 543-8921. And I have an email address for her, Michael_Bishop_US@yahoo.com. That's Michael_Bishop_US@yahoo.com. And for Richard Angel, Rich Angel, 721-5434, and Saloma Deidre Sipe at 880-9642. I think I gave that out incorrectly before. It's 880-9642. And Light Shift Global Meditation, June 1st at noon. Information on that, you can go to the website www.maxpages.com/light times with 2 T's. And we're back, and we already have a caller. We don't have much time left, so I want to thank everybody ahead of time for being here and for making these great calls. Caller, do you have a question?
Yeah, Heidi, what's the difference between, say, pasteurized milk and raw milk? Can you ask the panel about that?
Okay, and this is a good one to start with Rich, and he wanted to finish up a little bit of his diabetes question, then we'll go on to the milk question.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any dairy products, but if I were to have dairy products, I would certainly prefer raw, unpasteurized, unadulterated. It does have more life to it, and also it's got friendly bacteria, which, by the way, is the other part of my answer that you didn't hear about addressing the diabetes situation, is the friendly bacteria, and that can be found as a last resort in raw dairy product, especially yogurt. But better sources are raw, unwashed vegetables from your garden, not from the store, because you don't know where that's been, right? And also raw fermented foods like sauerkraut. I've got a batch at home, and things like that. And also as a supplement, there are bacterial supplements, Acidophilus bifidus, that kind of thing, that are available either at the store or through network marketing. Or
does miso qualify?
Miso,
fermented soybean paste.
Yeah, I understand that there is raw miso and there's also cooked miso. Okay. I would prefer the raw miso, but of course the soy has been processed anyway, so it hasn't been cooked twice, in other words. That's what they call raw miso.
Okay. And does anybody have a comment about the milk, the pasteurized, as opposed to raw milk? Any insights?
I think raw milk fresh from the cow is so different from milk that you get, from the store, and there's just no comparison. And it's like getting a garden-grown tomato compared to a grocery store tomato that's from far away.
Okay.
Just the taste in itself is really good.
And excuse me, Bronwyn.
Oh, go ahead.
I have really strong spiritual beliefs about milk that I believe are just as much a part of why raw milk is such a good food. And I can point out from my personal experience again that I was raised on raw milk straight from the cow. And the cows weren't fed antibiotics or hormones, and my mother actually let me eat all of the cream also. And I've never had a broken bone. I never had braces. I had a nice smile. And, for a long time people would always compliment on how nice my skin was, and I know for a fact that that's in large part because of all of the good milk that I was given. People now think that milk is so undigestible, and a lot of that is because the milk is so cooked, and people don't realize that pasteurization means that the milk is heated to boiling and then kept at that temperature for 20 minutes. And I mean, if you cooked anything that long, like if you cook broccoli for 20 minutes, it just turns into mush.
Yuck.
It kills all of the, it's like Rich was talking about the bacteria, there's also enzymes that are just as much as a calcium breakdown process as the calcium itself. And without those enzymes, the minerals in milk are unabsorbable.
We have about 2 minutes left. Is there anything anybody would like to add that I didn't get to in questions or any of the... Okay, go for it,
environment.
Rich. Okay.
Raw foods is in harmony with the environment.
Okay.
Think of all the fuel trees cut down to fuel fire. Jamaica, I believe it was Jamaica, was deforested for cooking wood, not for lumber, not for paper, but for cooking wood. And think of all the smoke we breathe and houses that burn down because of stove accidents and so on.
Okay, you'll probably be getting a lot of calls, Rich. Thanks a lot for all the wonderful information we've had here, and this has been really exciting for me. And if anybody is interested in having more of these panel discussions, I mean, what a group of talent we have here. Please give me a call and let me know you liked it. Have a glorious week, and get the roses ready. Give them out.